Welcome to a deep dive. And today we're really grappling with some big stuff, like faith and sacrifice. What does it really mean to commit? Like really commit. We're going deep on Genesis chapter 22 today.
Yeah, the binding of Isaac, right?
Exactly. You know the one. Abraham, Isaac.
Yeah.
That whole almost sacrificing your son thing.
Yeah.
Heavy stuff.
It's one of those stories. It's powerful, kind of disturbing, even if you're not, a religious scholar or anything. But it's foundational. This chapter, it underpins so much of how we understand obedience, covenants, how humanity relates to, well, God.
Totally. We're going beyond the surface level today. We found this breakdown from My Christian Space, and it's got some really intriguing interpretations. Intriguing is the word, yeah. So, okay, God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. What's the deal with that? It seems like pretty intense to ask, to put it mildly.
It's a test, for sure, but not the kind we think of at first, See, God's not looking for proof or anything. It's about total. The source uses the word consecration, giving something over to God completely. Think about Abraham. He chose to follow God, but was there something he was still holding on to?
So it's like, what are we holding back, in our own lives? Is there something that's stopping us from totally committing to what we say we believe? Whether it's our faith, our values, even just our goals.
Precisely. It's looking at the things we cling to so tightly. Careers, possessions, even just needing to be right all the time. And we got to ask, where's our loyalty, really? What's the one thing we're not willing to give up? And what could we achieve if we finally let go?
Whoa. That's a lot to think about. Speaking of journeys, the text says Abraham goes to the land of Moriah. And get this, it means the Lord is my teacher. Coincidence? I think not.
Not a chance. The Bible's very deliberate with language. And here's another thing. It takes them 3 days to get there. Now 3. That number's huge in the Bible. Jonah and the whale, anyone. Jesus' resurrection.
Right. 3 days. New beginnings. Something big is about to go down.
Exactly. 3 often means going through trials, transformations, overcoming things that seem impossible.
Okay, and check this out. Abraham tells his servants, hey, we'll be back. He actually believes it. Even though, well, he's going to sacrifice Isaac. The source points out that Abraham must have believed that God could raise Isaac from the dead. That's next level trust, wouldn't you say?
For sure. It's saying, okay, I might not have the answers, but God's got a plan. Having that faith in what we can't see, even when it's hard, when it doesn't make sense, don't you think that applies to our own lives too? When we have to make a choice, but we don't know how it'll turn out.
Absolutely. And, it's easy to focus on Abraham here, but Isaac plays a larger part than we give him credit for. He's the one carrying the wood for the sacrifice, just like
Jesus carrying the cross. Heavy symbolism right there.
Right. And remember, he's not a little kid anymore. Isaac understands what's going on. He even asks about the lamb for the offering. He's choosing to trust his father.
And that trust, being willing to submit to something bigger than himself, it makes you wonder about how faith is passed down through generations. What are we showing the next generation?
Okay, so here's the climax.
Yeah.
Right as Abraham's about to do it, God stops him. And boom, there it is, a ram caught in the bushes. You got to admit, that's awfully convenient timing.
I'd say symbolic is more like it. And it's not just some random animal. It's a ram, an adult. It represents maturity. That takes time to develop. A ram is just a lamb that's grown up.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. So are you saying this is pointing to Jesus centuries before he was even born?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
It's foreshadowing God's plan of redemption, that it would happen in his time. Sometimes sacrifice leads to something much, much bigger. And those sacrifices, they can take time, like that lamb becoming a ram.
Whoa. Gives me chills. Okay, and then there's the location. After everything happens, Abraham calls the place Adonai Yireh. What was that again?
The Lord will provide.
And where did this all happen? Mount Moriah. The place that would become, wait, Jerusalem. Isn't that name also about provision in a way?
It's incredible, right? The name for the city originally was Salem, meaning perfect. Put them together, you've got God's perfect provision.
Mind-blowing. It's like this one spot on a map holds the entire story, this promise that keeps going generation after generation. Makes you wonder what other hidden things are waiting to be discovered in the stories we think we know, right?
It's not just about the place, though, is it? This whole thing, it's about family lines, the generations that come after Abraham. Which brings us back to that covenant we were talking about.
Right. This isn't just about Abraham proving something. God makes some serious promises in return. Okay, so like refresher course time. What exactly is a covenant in this whole Bible context?
Good catch. We can all use a little glossary moment now and then. A covenant's more than just an agreement. It's a binding promise in the Bible, like a sacred oath between God and his people. Big deal stuff.
Got it. So what's in this specific covenant then?
Well, right after the whole Isaac situation, the angel of the Lord, he shows up again to Abraham. And he basically lays it out, this covenant that God first mentioned back in chapter 12,
Yeah.
about Abraham's descendants. There'll be tons of them, like stars in the sky. They'll get this land and get this. Through them, all nations will be blessed.
Wow. Talk about high stakes. Makes you wonder, what if Abraham hadn't gone through with it, What if he had said no?
$1,000,000 question, right. But this story really shows us, I think, that real faith, it takes being willing to give up even the things we hold most dear. It's that leap of faith, trusting there's something bigger going on that we can't see yet.
Totally. Okay, but something that struck me from my Christian space thing was that God knew Abraham would pass this test all along. It's not like he was waiting to see what would happen, right? So what's the point of the whole test thing in the first place?
Great question. And it gets right to the heart of why we're still talking about this story thousands of years later. See, this isn't for God's benefit. It's for ours. It's about how Abraham changes through this whole experience. He understands God better. He sees how strong his own faith can be.
So it's less about God needing information and more about Abraham and us really learning something.
Exactly. It's about growth. Realizing that sometimes the journey, the actual going through it, is just as important as where you end up. And those journeys, well, they're full of uncertainty, not knowing how things will turn out.
That's a really helpful way to look at it, especially when, we all have those mountains we have to face in life. Sometimes it feels like we're being asked to make huge sacrifices, but we don't know what'll happen. Maybe that's part of it, though.
Could be. Maybe it's about letting go of control. Trusting that even when we don't get it, there's this plan, a purpose way bigger than us.
Okay, changing gears for a sec. There's that part at the end of Genesis 22 about Nahor, Abraham's brother. He had a bunch of kids. Honestly, it felt kind of random after, the whole near sacrifice thing. What's that about?
Yeah, it's easy to skip over those family lists in the Bible, isn't it? They feel kind of like a roadblock when you're caught up in the story. But those lists are often important. Remember, this story is all about lineage, about Abraham's descendants, the generations to come.
So it's like we're getting ready for what happens next.
Exactly. And if you really look closely, some fascinating details pop up in that list. Like Nahor, he's got 12 sons.
Okay. And 12 means?
Completeness, divine order. It comes up again and again in the Bible. And get this, one of Nahor's descendants, Rebecca.
Oh, hold on. Rebecca. Isaac's wife. Jacob and Esau's mother.
Bingo. Even in those little details, it's planting seeds, showing how the covenant continues through Isaac's kids. The story's always moving forward, revealing new layers.
I love how you put that. It's like those Russian nesting dolls. You open one up and there's another one, just as detailed, inside. Makes you want to keep digging, see what else is hidden under the surface.
And what's so cool is that there isn't a tidy ending, We're left with more questions, more to think about, which is what makes these stories so interesting, even after all these years.
Feels like we found this treasure chest of meaning packed into just one chapter.
And like any good treasure, you got to really look at it to appreciate it.
So true. We talked about Abraham's faith, what that ram really means, how important Mount Moriah is, even how this story fits into the whole big picture of the Bible. But I bet we've only scratched the surface, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, we've just unpacked a little bit of what's here. But the important stuff, I think we hit on it. What really got to you?
That word consecration, it really stayed with me. It's not just giving something up, it's like dedicating it to something much bigger. That My Christian Space article really got that across.
It's such a powerful idea, and it goes way beyond religion, It makes you think, what am I really dedicated to? What do I put my whole heart into? What would I give everything for?
That's a tough one. And I think doing this deep dive, it gave me a new way to think about that. It's like we all know that story, Abraham and Isaac, but you don't realize how much is packed in there until you really dig into it.
It's one of those stories that makes you think about faith, about what it means to obey, the whole idea of sacrifice. It reminds us that even when we're lost or unsure, there's something bigger happening.
It's like we may not always get why we go through tough times, but this story, it says there's a bigger plan, even when we can't see it.
Exactly. And sometimes the times we grow the most are when we're confused, when we're wrestling with those hard questions.
To wrap things up, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to remember from our deep dive into Genesis 22?
I think the question is, what sticks with you? The story's got so many layers. What are you holding back? What promises is God waiting to give you?
Man, Okay, everyone, that's a wrap on our deep dive into Genesis chapter 22. We covered a ton and hopefully give you something to think about.
It's a chapter worth looking at for your whole life. Keep digging, keep asking those tough questions.
So this week, think about this. What are those impossible mountains in your own life? What are you being asked to sacrifice? And where do you find that strength to trust in something bigger than yourself, even when you can't see the whole path ahead? Until next time, keep asking, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.